Good evening out there. It is 6:58 right now, and we're just getting stuff set up here for our midweek live stream, and hoping that everyone's having as good of a week as you possibly can. I know that many people are not, but our thoughts and our prayers are with everyone who are affected by this, and that means pretty much everybody in the world is affected by this right now in some form or fashion. The pandemic has affected you, even if you do not yourself have the virus or even know anyone who does have it. It's still something that affects us all. And this was the first Wednesday that we've had any kind of a live stream going for our midweek services. Last week was a little bit of it kind of felt like a sprint, just trying to get a few things set up and figuring out the best possible ways and things to do the live stream services. And I think that we're finally getting our footing on that, making some headway with how everything appears. And so we decided to go ahead and add in some more things to have something, even if it's small, going on each day. And so I'll go ahead and take this time, since we're not quite at 7 o'clock yet, to go over some of the stuff that we do have throughout the week. And I'll begin with tomorrow. We'll resume the ladies' Bible study, and that'll be at 6 o'clock. And if we can get everything set up correctly this time with YouTube, we should have it running concurrently on YouTube and Facebook Live. Facebook Live will probably be a little bit more real-time, not quite as delayed as YouTube, but it will be an option on there if you do not have a Facebook account. And if you do want to comment, Facebook will probably be the place to do that. It seems to be the easiest way to view everything. On Fridays, we're going to start doing a little kids devotional, and you might even see some other smaller people than what you've seen on here so far during the last couple of weeks, as we look at aiming some videos at some of the kids so they can get on there and watch that. And after today, you may think that this one was aimed at kids, but I promise you it wasn't really with that thought process in mind. On Saturday afternoon, I believe I put down at 2 o'clock, I'm going to be doing a technology class. We're in the time now where most people are having to depend on technology. I've had lots of people ask me, how do I view the services? How do I do this? How do I do that? And so we're just going to simply kind of resume the class we had a few years ago for learning how to use your phone, learning how to use your computer, tell you what Zoom is, these kinds of things, so that you can participate in them. And then Sunday we will have our worship service again. And Monday, we will have a little video posted around 11:30 for a little brief Bible study. And then Tuesday evening, we're going to do our guys' Bible study. And after last night, I believe we're going to go ahead and have that be on Zoom only. There were periods when other people besides me were talking on Zoom, and everyone who was watching on Facebook just got to stare at me while I sat in silence listening, and I thought, well, this isn't really great. So we're going to change that over to Zoom for next Tuesday evening's Bible study at 6:30. And if you don't know that, tune in on Saturday and to Facebook Live, and we'll be talking about what Zoom is and go from there. I do want to mention that John Lynan had his heart shock done today, and word from Effie was that it did get the heart back in rhythm, so we are very grateful for that. Also, we will be delivering on Friday a lot of the eggs for our virtual Easter egg hunt. The weather on Sunday morning looks to be somewhat miserable. Temperatures will be much colder and windier on Sunday, so if you prefer to get out on Saturday and do your little Easter egg hunt, that'd be great. We just ask if you don't mind them being shared on the web, go ahead and send us some videos or some photos of your kids doing the Easter egg hunt. We would love to see them and keep up with them on things like that. Today, we're going to go ahead and get started with a new series I'm just going to make sure that everything, all right, good. Sometimes you never know if the stuff does what you want it to. We're going to get started with a little new series I'm going to start doing on Wednesdays through this, and just talk about some of my favorite Bible stories. And I would be willing to guess that these will be a lot of your favorite Bible stories as well. And I was sitting back this week thinking kind of where to begin with this. And so I decided to go with a story that most everyone should have already seen about in their Bibles, read about, seen movies about, seen TV shows about, and that is the story that features a young boy who went out and faced a giant pickle. And if you're familiar at all with VeggieTales, then you know that this is talking about Dave and the giant pickle, which is, of course, from 1 Samuel chapter 17, the story of David and Goliath. And so if you do have your Bibles with you, just go ahead and pull those up. And we're going to be starting reading in 1 Samuel 17. I'm also going to have this on the screen if you'd simply like to read it there, if your screen's large enough to see this print. Starting in chapter 17, verse 2. Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in line of battle against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. And when I first was writing all this out, I was sitting there thinking, I need to go ahead and end it right after that part. It talks about how tall he was. But I thought, now that's just not doing everything justice for what an imposing figure this would be. Because we know lots of tall people. I've known people at my home congregation growing up who have to duck in the door whenever they come in to the worship auditorium. I know people like Sam who, I get a crick in my neck if I get too close to him and attempt to have an eye-to-eye contact with. But still, you would look at that and you think, okay, this is someone who's really tall. Goliath's height, somewhere around 7 to 9 feet tall, most likely. Very, very large man. But I want you to just look there at exactly what else there is about him. He's got a helmet made of bronze on his head, armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had bronze armor on his legs and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. This guy really, really likes bronze. And just look at the weight of this. There is not one piece of his body, one area of his body that does not have some kind of armor on him. The coat of mail, the helmet on his head, and even on his legs. And then he's wielding this huge javelin, which would have to be huge, otherwise it would just look really tiny in his hands. And so you look at this, and not only is this a huge giant, but this is a man who's a huge giant, and he's just covered in armor. I mean, I picture something like Hulk whenever he's wearing the Hulkbuster armor, the one that Tony designed the Iron Man suit to take out the Hulk, and it's roughly the size of that. That's what I picture with Goliath, is just this huge machine because of how much metal there is on him. And this is the man that's coming out there to go ahead and fight the Israelites. And so we'll go ahead and keep on reading here. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and the shield-bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, let him come down to me. If he's able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistine said, I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. I got to say, I don't know if I would exactly be very brave in this instance if I was there. I don't like to arm wrestle against Candace for fear that I might get beat. I certainly don't want to go tackle someone who's got thousands of pounds of armor on and is a good 3 feet taller than me. But this is what he's done. He's come down there and he says, we don't need to fight all this war. You pick someone, we've picked someone, let's fight and we'll see what happens. But Israel, as you know from hearing the story, I'm sure since you were growing up, they're too scared for anyone to choose someone. They don't want to pick a champion, and so they pick no one. And he comes out day after day after day, and he is defying Israel. He is defying God. He is mocking all of Israel and their fear, and in doing so, he is hurling insults at God Almighty himself. And in this story, we talk about who all is there. We have Saul and the armies, but we also find out that David is not there. And it's going to be interesting because later on in the story of David, you're going to find out about another time when kings are at war and David is not there. But that story has a very drastic difference in what takes place. Because in this one, David is not there, but he longs to be. And his father sends him there to check in on the brothers who are there, and he gets there. And after David arrives, we read that David came to the encampment as the host was going out to the battle line, shouting the war cry. And Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. And David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage and ran to the ranks and went and greeted his brothers. As he talked with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before. And David heard him. All the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were much afraid. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? They want to know, are you seeing this? Can you believe what's going on here? And what do you think they're expecting David to say? Who is David? David's not one of the people that is sitting there fighting. David has not been in the war. David has not been in battles. David is a shepherd. David sits alone in the fields looking after sheep. And so whenever he shows up to the real battlegrounds, as it were, the rest of the people are saying, can you believe this? Look what we're dealing with. Can you believe that your job is easy? This is what we've got going on over here. They would say, don't you see why we are so scared? But of course, we know how this story is going to go. We know that David is not going to sit there and have this same fear that goes on. And so David decides, let me talk to the king. Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or a bear, and he took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." That takes a lot of courage. But as far as David is concerned, there's really no courage involved. This is simply God saved me before, God is going to save me again. And he has this faith in God. To say, I know that if I do the right thing, I know that if I trust in God, and I know that because of my relationship with God, that he will be able to save me. And so you have all this set up. Goliath coming down, mocking Israel day after day after day. David coming up and seeing it. David volunteering his services to go out and fight this man. And then we finally go ahead and get to the climax of the story. Nope. Don't worry, I am not going to do any silly songs. But this would be the part in the VeggieTales where Larry would come out and sing a silly song. So just a little comedic relief there to build up the anticipation for the ending of this story. But let's go ahead and we'll skip the silly song. I'm sorry, kids, you're not going to get to hear me sing that today. What happens? David is the he it talks about here. He took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. I want to just stop there for a second. This is what Goliath has been waiting for. He has been waiting for some man to come out and fight him. And they finally send someone, and it's a boy. It's not even someone who is full grown. It's not even someone who's been there. This guy hasn't even been there at all for this. And so he looks out and he goes, "This is what I get? This is who you send me? You go over here, and after all this time, I get this boy." And he is bummed out. What kind of victory is this going to be if he goes out and he kills a child? It's not going to be any victory at all. Where's the glory in this, is what he thinks. And so he gets upset with that. And he looks and he sees, and what is David holding? He's got a staff in his hand. And he says, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And I just want to stop right there. In the VeggieTales version of this story, he actually does say that. They don't change every single line. He says, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And Dave looks at him and he goes, "I don't quite know what that means, but I am not a dog." And I just kind of sit there and wonder, what kind of humor you might have in all of these circumstances. But he says, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field." What does David do to prepare? He goes down and he picks out 5 stones. And you wonder to yourself, why 5 stones? And so there's some ideas here. Was David a bad shot? Did he have an occasion where he would miss? I kind of think no. When you got a target that big, you're probably not going to miss. Is he thinking, well, there's only so much that's not covered up by all that armor. I may need to take a few different shots at it? No. What is it? Well, Goliath is not an only child. Goliath has 4 brothers. And so I believe that whenever he picks up those 5 stones, he says, I know God's going to help me out, but I'm going to be ready in case I need to go up against all 5 of this family. What kind of faith does that take to sit there and say, I'm good. Even if your whole family of giants comes after me, I can just reload this sling and God will still take care of you. Of course, we all know the story ends. The rock hits him right in the forehead, knocks him down, and he uses Goliath's own sword, chops off his head. The battle is won, the Philistines start running, and Israel pursues. And God's power is shown. We have David and Goliath stories all the time that we talk about, usually in sports. The lowly Division II team taking out a top 5 program. Someone you've never heard of before beating Duke in basketball. Anyone beating the Patriots. And we see these stories all the time, but sometimes they lose their impact on what that first story was. But we can sit down and we can watch Appalachian State beat Michigan back in 2005. And we go, oh, that's a great David and Goliath story. What did David and Goliath have to compare that story to? All they had was the faith that God could do this. The faith of all the times throughout the period when there was no king and there were only judges that would have to deliver them from their enemies, that great things could happen. And right now we look around and our entire world has come to a screeching halt right now. And sometimes it feels like everything is against us. We can't even meet together. We can't do anything. Movie theaters are shut down. And sometimes it feels like it's us against everyone. Well, God has accomplished things much greater than that. We'll get through all of this. And just remember another great story when things seemed to be down. In just a couple of days is going to be the day that we call Good Friday. The Friday before Easter. The day that Jesus was killed on the cross. How badly did the apostles feel like they had it at that point in time? 3 years wasted. Everything they hoped for, gone. But it wasn't the end of the story, because 3 days later, on the day we call Easter, the tomb was empty. Death had been chased away. Death had been hit in the forehead. Death had had its head chopped off. And David looks down and says, man, I thought my story had a great ending. Doesn't even match it. Whenever you feel like I'm just a boy, I'm just a child, I'm just a girl, I'm just even a young adult, what can I do? You can do anything. I can do all things. Not by myself, but with Christ, all those things are possible. And when the man who wrote it, he was not talking about just any little thing. He was talking about everything that he's endured in his life and how he could continue to endure the bad because all things were possible through Christ. David and Goliath. Story ended with victory for God. And what we have to remember is the victory's already been won. There's not some future battle that will be fought. There's not someone waiting for a champion to step up and fight for God. That battle is over. It's already been won. Whatever things look like right now on this earth, God has already won the final battle, and we have our assurance through what we will have through that. I hope that you all have a great ending of your week. I hope you enjoyed this time together to watch a little bit and talk a little bit about this great story from 1 Samuel. Hope that you all stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to seeing you the next few days for some of our smaller classes online, and then Sunday morning at 9:45. God bless.